Good evening, everyone. Sorry, was muted there, of course. It's so nice to be with you tonight. I'm Marie Beam, CEO of Discovery Museum. And what you see behind me is our new beautiful community art display titled Communal Gifts, created by our visitors last week during April School Vacation Week here in Massachusetts with tonight's speaker, Chanel Thervil. More on that in a moment. Welcome to the third event in the 2024 Discovery Museum Speaker Series, How Art Can Inspire Civic Engagement in Kids, with artist and educator Chanel Thervil. Thank you for joining us for this important conversation. For those of you who've been with us before, you'll recognize a little bit of housekeeping. I'll go as quickly as I can. Q&A will be open throughout the event. Please submit your questions anytime using the Q&A button, and we'll address as many as possible after Chanel's presentation. Please use the chat button for any technical questions for the webinar host. Closed captioning can be turned on and off at the bottom of your screen. And finally, thank you to Chanel for inviting us to record tonight's presentation. A link to the recording will be sent to all registrants once available, and we'll also send a resource list with any follow-up information referenced during the talk. I'm pleased to acknowledge our wonderful speaker series sponsors. Tonight's event is free thanks to the loyal support of Enterprise Bank and Sutherland Realty Group, along with the other generous sponsors shown here. Their support has made this 12th year of the Discovery Museum Speaker Series possible. And thank you too to those of you who made a donation when you registered for tonight's event. That's a big help. I have a special thank you tonight, however, for the Greater Lowell Community Foundation. A significant grant through the Foundation's Racial Equity and Inclusion Program has made possible both tonight's event and our week-long Artist in Residence partnership with Chanel, which encouraged hundreds of children to share their voices and imagine how they could contribute to the betterment of their communities. This has been a really important program for the museum and, of course, for our visiting kids and families. We're so grateful to the Greater Lowell Community Foundation for all of their partnership. This year's speaker series theme is Conversation, Understanding, Hope. As you may know, we've chosen to host conversations on topics that can be challenging or chewy for families or anyone really to navigate. Our goal is that with the guidance of informed and insightful speakers, we can all gain a better understanding of these issues, and through that, a more hopeful perspective on the future and our ability and the ability of our children to navigate it. Our next event will be on May 22nd, featuring Junlei Lee from the Harvard Graduate School of Education, speaking on the science of good enough relationships, trusting and developing our capacity for simple and authentic human interactions. I think this is going to be a really incredible and interesting conversation that will be reassuring to so many of us who find it hard to connect in authentic ways in in this complicated world now. Registration for all is open now on our website, of course, free, like all of our speaker series events. And if you'd like to watch any of our past events, recordings, as always, can be found on the Discovery Museum Speaker Series YouTube channel. We have guests from near and far with us tonight, so I will briefly introduce our museum and our work to any of you who don't know us. This will be very brief. Discovery Museum works to support kids and families by providing play-based learning experiences that are rooted in science and nature. We create exhibits and art. We create exhibits and programs that spark kids' natural creativity and curiosity and make learning fun. In 2023, we were able to grow our impact to new audiences, continue on a path toward carbon neutrality, and work with our community partners to better reflect and serve a diverse array of interests and lived experiences. I'm very excited that we are embarking this month on a strategic planning process to envision the museum's next 5 years. We will be inviting input from across our community, and you'll be hearing more on this in the coming months. But if you have ideas for how we might extend our impact, please do reach out. And now let me invite Chanel to turn on her video, and I will introduce her to all of you. Hi, Chanel. Chanel Thervil is a Haitian American artist and educator who uses varying combinations of abstraction and portraiture to convene communal dialogue around culture, social issues, and existential questions. She's been making a splash in New England via her educational collaborations, public art, and residencies with institutions that support the uplift of community creativity. We have really been honored that she has continued this work with us at the Discovery Museum. We were so thrilled to have Chanel as our inaugural artist in residence last week, working with visitors exploring art and community and connection and creating the stunning communal art installation that you see behind me. Um, this has been an inspiring testament to the creativity and empathy and thoughtfulness of children, and really would not have been possible without Chanel's impassioned belief in the power of art to inspire change. Um, Before I let Chanel start, I'll just share that one young visitor really captured what Chanel's program was all about while creating his communal gift art piece. He said, I know what community means. It means helping other people. And so, Chanel, I think we are changing the world, and thank you for joining us. I turn it over to you, and thank you again.
Thank you so much. And hello, everyone, both in the virtual world who are currently tuning in with us right now, and also those who are going to tune in a little later. I will give my human disclaimer that I have a dog who may or may not be barking in the background. So please do your best to excuse me and my dog as he continues to just showcase how much he loves what I'm talking about as well. So I'm gonna share my screen. All right. All right. So once again, I'm really excited to be here chatting with you about all of the ways that art can inspire civic engagement in kids. But before we get started with that, I want to do just a little introduction about who I am as a person. So there's already been a little bit of an introduction about me in terms of what I care about, but I want to say a little bit about how I identify myself. So I'm Miami born, Brooklyn raised, and New England residing, and I'm also a Haitian American artist and educator. And that is very difficult to say 5 times quickly, but to me, it really resonates the way that I identify how my experiences that I've had growing up in different spaces and places have influenced what I do as an artist and as an educator. At the core of my creative practice, the primary components are painting, portraits, installation, social practice, and participatory art. And just as a quick note on what fuels me, I think a lot about hope, joy, affirmation, and generating opportunities for people to reflect and or learn. So some of you may be on this Zoom wondering, how does that connect to kids and civic engagement? So I wanted to pull up this really phenomenal infographic from the University of Minnesota. I really love this graphic because I feel like it makes civic engagement easier to understand for the average person. So if we take a look in the very center, civic engagement at its core is this ongoing cycle of collaboration, discussion, and reflection that happens over and over again. And if we look towards the center and the top of our infographic, you'll see that there are conveners and community that kind of start the process of preparing conversations around change. Conveners are really the people that are creating these environments for collaboration to happen. And in that collaboration, we then can move ourselves towards inquiring, asking questions, being curious about the world, reflecting through analyzing what we know and what we've discussed together, synthesizing more of that information and trying to make sense of all the moving parts, and then making a plan to act together to address that issue, which in turn leads to us going through the motions of pushing for a change that we want to see in the world. So I feel like a lot of my work revolves around this infographic and thinking about collaboration, reflection, and discussion as a never-ending cycle, and a case study for empathy and how that can be a backbone to the skills that we want to build in our children so that they become adults that we can be proud of. So with that being said, enter in my time with the Discovery Museum and creating communal gifts. So this was really a labor of love for me because I got asked by the museum to think about something that was really important to me and bring it to the center stage for my residency. And when thinking about children, as an educator also, I'm always thinking about ways that we can build skills in them that we want to see them continue to follow through with as adults. And for me, when I think about what I love about my society, I also start thinking about community and the different collaborations that can happen within that. And if you know, you paid attention to that infographic, community and conveners coming together means that there's something starting to percolate in terms of cultivating a change that we want to see in the world. So my way of convening people is using art. And in this instance, I wanted visitors to think about a community space that they cherish and creating an artwork that could be a gift to that space. For the younger visitors, we modified our language just a little bit and asked them to think about their favorite places where they gathered with people that they love. So what came out of that was a big conglomerate of lots of beauty. So here are some examples of what some of those individual communal gifts look like. So the top three answers for community spaces that were cherished or places that they love to go with loved ones happen to be schools, beaches, and parks. So we can see a little bit of the nature element here, some school action, and some close-ups on a really beautiful interpretation of some library action, some trees, and folks who just felt inclined to identify their sentiment by drawing hearts, thinking about that community and that love. So in our time together, we ended up meeting around 1,000 visitors who came through the art room, who decided to leave their communal gifts with us, which I'm very, very grateful for. And one of the things I love about this project is the real variety in responses. So in addition to that top three I just mentioned, people were thinking a lot about their churches. They were thinking a lot about places in their home where they gather with people, like backyard barbecues. People were also thinking a lot about abstract interpretations, lots of squiggles from the younger visitors that showcased how they felt about their community spaces. So when thinking about this idea of showcasing individuals' expressions of their community love, I wanted to ensure that the artwork had a backdrop of celebration. So as you can see here, there's some close-ups of some of the paneling that I included on the shelves of the artwork. And a lot of this was just abstractions of hearts and also thinking about colors that resonated with that sentiment of celebration, wanting things to be bright, punchy, and exciting. So here are just some beautiful close-ups again of me doing some install of the work. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't say a big thank you to the Discovery Museum staff, Paul, Kelly, and Liz, who are really fundamental in supporting this work throughout my residency for the week. And here, of course, is the necessary selfie and the finished work as well. One of the things that I loved about working in partnership with the museum on this project was really seeing all of the different ways that visitors were evoking different parts of themselves they didn't realize as they talked about what they loved about their communities and the spaces that they gathered. I was a witness to so many conversations that stayed on the positive sentiments of what it meant to gather together, what it meant to create environments that feel safe and warm and fun, and also what it means to use art to describe those places so we have a visual for that kind of love. And again, the sentiments of fun and joy that are coming from these questions that we're pondering the answers to together. So I would say overall, one of the things that I really, really, really enjoyed as an artist in residence was seeing the creativity soar from people as they just were able to talk about things that felt really important to them. And again, if we think back to that infographic about civic engagement, that reflection, that discussion, that collaboration, all of that is very present here. and intentionally woven into the steps that we have to guide visitors to expressing their creativity and having this end result of something beautiful that we can all appreciate and feel proud of. It's not uncommon for me to have visual representations of communal thoughts. So, with that being said, I want to dive into a couple of my archives and show you some past works that I've done that also ring true the spirit of celebration and the spirit of pushing people towards thinking about civic engagement. So, one of the first works that I'll be talking about is this body of work called Enigma Reactions to Racism that I did in partnership with the Urbano Project in Jamaica Plain, Boston. So, for this project, what I wanted to do initially was think about ways that people could express really difficult things without being harmed. So, to be a little more specific, I was thinking about Black millennial experiences with racism and trying to find ways that I could get people to share these stories without being harmed by the potential presence of people who may not understand their stories. So, I wanted to start this off as a portrait series that would allow people to not only learn a little bit more about individuals, but hear their stories and have an opportunity to reflect on ways that they could be a support, an ally, or just think more deeply about the issues of racism and how it pops up in their lives. So for me, it starts with photography. I photographed a couple of different people, Black millennials that I knew in Boston, who were willing to be a part of this project. And my goal as a photographer is to get the sentiments that are a little more subtle and harder to place. I'm not looking for people to pose for me, but I am looking for genuine expressions. And I often photograph those through having conversations with people about, again, things that may come up for them as difficult or hard to understand. So once I have the photographs done, I then use my handy dandy woodcutter, as you can see here, a jigsaw, because I use those jigsaws to cut and create different patterns to help me cut out the portraits that I've created. So after all the drawing and cutting, I then entered into the painting process to start to bring the portraits to life. So as you can see here, I'm just using a multitude of different materials. I consider myself a mixed media artist, so I love to dabble in paint and fabric and paper and all kinds of materials to evoke the expressions that I think are most prevalent in the works that I'm creating. So again, I'd mentioned that I wanted to share these stories. So I decided to focus on using this technology called Bear Conductive, which is a paint that is activated by touch and it sparks the audio for people to share their stories. So I ended up interviewing all of the folks that I took portraits of. I asked them to share an experience about racism that confused them. I asked them to share an experience about racism that left them feeling frustrated. And I also asked them to share an experience about racism that just was hard for them to understand. And I ended up using the audio once again in all of the portraits that are going to be seen here in a couple of the next slides. And the way that the experience happened is essentially that you would walk up to this portrait, you'd put on the headphones, and you would touch different patterns of the paint, and that would activate the audio of the person telling their story about their experience with racism. So you can see on the right-hand side, that's just a close-up of what I call the motherboard, where I program the audio for all of the stories. So those motherboards are hidden pretty discreetly, I hope, in different elements of the design of the artwork for each of the portraits. So altogether for this exhibition, I had created in partnership with the Urbano Project, I had, I think, about 8 or 9 different people, portraits, and stories that you could listen to. So here's just some close-ups of some of the portraits that are included in this project. I also included text. I was thinking a lot about random thoughts that kind of play in your head as you're experiencing something confusing, and I was letting those be expressed in different parts of the artwork as well. So, given that I wanted people to experience this without necessarily having the immediacy of responding, I knew it was important to include an element of this exhibition where people could actually respond. Sitting with someone's story about racist encounters is hard, and I wanted there to be a place where people could kind of release some of what they were holding on to as they listened. So I created this element called Lay It on the Line, and I literally asked people what resonated with you after hearing these stories and encountering this artwork. So, what I didn't expect after creating this work is how many people would come to this with their children, how many teachers would bring their students. That was quite a surprise to me because I thought that given it being an exhibition about racism, that it would be taboo or even difficult for people to want to engage with. But I realized through the presentation of art as that vehicle for change, it really offers different types of entryways for people to start thinking about these issues and joining in on the conversations. So I think during the course of the couple of months that I had this exhibition up, we were able to see a couple of thousand people come through the gallery, which was really wonderful. It had one of the biggest exhibition openings that the Urbano Project has had ever, which I also feel very proud of. Um, and in general, I was just very excited to see that people were leaving their thoughts behind so that I could know, as an artist, feedback. What were people thinking as they were encountering this work? What was resonating with them? It's not often as an artist that you get that direct feedback, especially feedback that can be generated after people have had some time to sit and digest some of the content. So here are a couple of feedback pieces that I really wanted to share. People overlook others' achievements, good grades, degrees simply because of their color. I will work every day to have my students know the wiser. Boston teacher. Surviving and rising against the odds. Where are you from? As a recent Chinese immigrant, I was taught to be afraid of Black folks. I've learned that everyone of all identities deserve respect. So once again, for me, if we think about that infographic in the beginning again of reflection, discussion, and collaboration, all of those elements are touched upon, and it's helping people, not just kids, but also adults, be more civic minded as they interact with people that are different from them and may have different experiences. Oof. So that was a lot to relive on my end, but I'm hoping that it piqued your interest to hear about my next project, Mariposas and Mangoes with Hyde Square Task Force. So Hyde Square Task Force is an organization also located in Jamaica Plain that focuses on Latinx heritage. And I had the opportunity to be an artist in residence with them, with a fellow artist, Iris LePay, to create Mariposas and Mangoes, which essentially was conceived as an interactive artwork and storytelling event about Afro-Latin cultures. So one of the things that I really loved about collaborating with Iris was that this collaboration stemmed from our friendship. Iris is Dominican American, I'm Haitian American, and there is a long history of tensions between Haitians and Dominicans despite sharing an island. And I feel like our friendship is fighting against that negative connotation that's had. In addition to just me being enamored with her as a friend, I love her creative mind. And she had a lot to bring to the table in terms of thinking about the mariposas, which is the Spanish word for butterflies, that we wanted to incorporate as the iconography for our artwork. So we landed on mariposas and butterflies because mariposas and mangoes, excuse me, because mariposas are not just, it's not just the Spanish word for butterflies, but we also know that mariposas are seen in many different cultures as these signals of hope. Um, More specifically, it relates to Dominican culture because there were these three women named the Maribal sisters who stood up to the Dominican dictator Trujillo when he was massacring Haitians unfairly. Ultimately, these women lost their lives in protest of what was right, but we consider them to be martyrs to the cause, and we wanted to honor them by including the three mariposas in our work. The mangoes as an iconography was related to Haiti. Ooh, excuse me. The mangoes as iconography relates to Haiti because Haitian mangoes are some of the most delicious mangoes. I don't know if you've ever had any, but they're so good, so sweet, so juicy. And we wanted that to relate to the fertile soil that Haiti has and the richness it has as a country in terms of their uh, just cultural amazingness. So we included the mangoes as a part of that. And then we also have the red and blue, which count as the parts of the Haitian and Dominican flag that we see if we were to look into those cultures. So now we had the bare bones or the backbone of our artwork, but we needed to activate it with people power. So we had an event at Hyde Square Task Force where we asked people to come and add to the artwork to activate it with different stories about their own culture. So you can see here, people are reading the different prompts. We had them in English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole. And essentially, every question that someone picked was a different prompt about their culture or a value that related to Haiti or Dominican Republic. In this instance, I shared a little bit about the Marival sisters already, and we included those stories in the prompts that we shared with people. So as they picked a prompt, they were learning a fact and also sharing a fact about themselves. So once again, this was a really enlightening experience for me because I had no idea how people were going to respond to the prompts. We were just hoping that folks would come and they'd be open enough to share. And a lot of people got very vulnerable when it came to thinking about their values, their cultural celebrations, and some of the fears that they have as well as it relates to being in community and having all that you need to thrive. So here are some lovely photos of us activating the artwork by adding the different pieces together. In addition to thinking about activating the artwork, one of the ways that Iris and I like to be conveners is by ensuring that we're, again, creating a safe space for community to thrive and to have their souls fed, you know? It's not just enough to give them a visual feast of the eyes. We wanted to actually feed people and intellectually feed people too. So we partnered with a local fruit stand and gave everyone who attended the event a mango. And we also partnered with the Boston Public Library's Bibliocycle. They decided to bring in some books about Afro-Latino cultures that we could share with our audience. And it was just a joy to have so many ways that people could enter into these conversations about their culture, cultural differences, and also ways that we can celebrate those differences rather than let them divide us. So in addition to activating the artwork, eating a mango, reading a wonderful book, we also chose to design these enamel pins that said mariposas and mangoes to give to people as a additional gift and thank you for their vulnerability for coming, showing up, and sharing themselves. I was hard pressed to get a image of the artwork on its own because that night was just so full of community. And as you can see, Iris and I are very excited to know that there are little mango lovers who enjoyed the work, but also enjoyed the spirit of community that happened through the convening around art. And last but not least, I wanted to go into my final project that I wanted to share with you guys that relates to art and civic engagement. This one is called Warm and Fuzzy Fields that I did in partnership with the Boston Children's Museum. So this one was really fun to do, but it was at a hard time. I created this work just before the pandemic started, and I'm really thankful that I was able to do that because the beginning of this work started with being in conversation with friends and friends of friends who noticed that they had circles of women in their lives that were of different cultures that they were developing really strong friendships with. So when thinking about these women-centered friendships of diverse cultures, What I wanted to highlight is that being different again is something to celebrate. Knowing that this was going to be in a children's museum and knowing that at the time there were a lot of fears around people who are different. Once the pandemic started, I'm sure we can all remember a lot of those instances where there was heavy targets on Asians. There was a huge hate crime spike amongst different communities. I was trying to really fight against that and push back against that through creating this work where I'm celebrating these friendships amongst women of all different cultures. So once again, it started with some photography. Here I am photographing actual women who are friends with each other, being themselves, having conversations, talking about life and love. And one of the things that made me really proud about creating this work too is that I was able to honor women that have been in my life for over almost 2 decades now. Some of these friends that I've had for quite a while, most of my life at this point. I got a chance to honor them and hear their stories and also hear how they valued friendship. So once again, when I'm thinking about the photography for these works, I want to capture subtleties and I also want to capture just genuine images of the women being themselves around the people that they love. Once again, my handy dandy jigsaw is out on the prowl, making the woodcuts happen. And here are just some views of my studio of the work in process. But I feel like there's no better Chanel than the Chanel of the past to tell you more about this work, so I'm gonna let her do the talking. Hey there, it's Chanel, and I'm at the Boston Children's Museum to give you a tour of my exhibition, Warm and Fuzzy Feels. This body of work was my tribute and celebration of multicultural friendships between women. I'm really excited, as you can see by my dance moves, to show you around. Let's start off with a wide view of the gallery. There's a special aura of tenderness, care, joy, and love that's generated by friendship between women. While differences make us special, there are some communities where it's uncommon to befriend people from different cultures. From childhood into adulthood, I've had many multicultural friendships with women that have given me a sensation I can only describe as warm and fuzzy feels. As a mixed media artist, I've always been intrigued by juxtaposing different kinds of materials together to make my artwork. Warm and Fuzzy Feels is no different. This time, I've decided to mesh together portraiture, abstraction, and actual words and phrases from the women that I've depicted in the exhibition. This space of 400 square feet is filled with the portraits of 14 different women that I was able to photograph and interview in order to create this artwork. Let's take a closer look, starting with Sheila and Anda. When I interviewed and photographed them in the studio, they both confirmed that their friendship is filled with a lot of hugs. So it seemed like the best way to depict them for the portrait. When I asked about a word to describe their friendship, they both replied with nurturing. Here's a closer look at Anda's quote that's included in the portrait. Next up, we've got a fabulous foursome, Tamika, Jeannie, Nadia, and Linda. Photographing and interviewing them definitely came with an even mix of smiles and substance. While they were photographed as a foursome, I actually broke them up into pairs to fill the space. On the right side, we have Nadia and Linda, who describe their friendship as enriching. Here's a closer look at the quote from Nadia that I included in the space beside their portrait. On the left side, we've got Tamika and Jeannie, whose friendship makes them feel included. Also, here's the quote from Jeannie that I used in the space. Comparing the photographs to the artworks, one of the things that I love is the subtlety and nuance in all of their facial expressions and their body language. Next up, we've got Tiffany and Darlene. While I wasn't able to photograph them together, the good news is Tiffany is a great actress. And I had some images of Darlena from past girls' trips that we've been on. So I was able to use that as reference. Another thing about being an artist is that you have the creative license to make some changes in color here and there. Darlena's hair was actually pink at the time that I made this portrait of her. When asked about their friendship, the words that came up were balanced and complete, which felt like such complimentary thoughts, even though they were interviewed at a distance. With that said, here's Darlena's quote that I used in the artwork. Next up, we've got Aldora, Monira, and Candace. One of the great things about photographing these ladies in the park is that natural light just helps the melanin glow. I mean, look at how beautiful their brown skin is. Wow. Glad I was able to capture it. The words that came up when they were reflecting on their friendship were grateful and appreciated. Here's a closer look at the full quote from Aldora that I used part of in the artwork. Rounding out our last group of portraits, we have Ariel, Maria, and Cristela. In addition to being in admiration of this trio's love for journalism, while I was photographing them, I couldn't help but notice how intently they listen to each other. It's clear that they operate from such a place of respect for one another. Here's a closer look at the quote from Maria that I used beside their portrait. It's time to spin right into the compositional details of this work now that we've met all the wonderful women depicted. In addition to my moving and grooving, the ways that I wanted to make this space feel celebratory was really through evoking a sense of movement and good vibrations. So, literally, all of the yellow marks that are surrounding the portraits are those good vibrations. There's also some hints of red confetti type shapes that are the patterns in the background. And I also made a point to just have actual warm and fuzzy materials like orange shag carpet and blue felt circles as a part of the trim around the top of the exhibition. With all that's going on in our world today, it's important that we embrace people who are different and make space for joyful connections and an occasional electric slide. All right. So once again, hey there, it's Chanel, and we're thinking about these feelings and these sentiments of collaboration, discussion, and reflection that bring us back to civic engagement. At the core, that's what we're doing, right? So when I was making that project and thinking about what I want to showcase and what I want to say about these different women and multicultural friendships, the core of that is the love, the joy, the celebration of differences, and considering that as something that makes us unique. Even when making the video, I was thinking a lot about the language I was using, again, as the video is catered towards kids, thinking about the language I'm using, even when describing things like skin and making sure that I'm saying that brown skin is beautiful, making sure that I'm commenting on not just the physical appearance, but the intellect of these women, not just the intellect, but also what I notice between how they treat each other, right? So again, these are subtle but intentional things that I'm doing to ensure that kids know what we want to see them do is emulate that. Whew. So that was a mouthful. Thank you for everyone's giving me patience and grace as we made it through this together. And with that being said, I'm excited to have you ask me all of the things. I'm opening the floor up for questions and looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Chanel, for sharing not just your perspective and yourself, but your artistic vision with us. It was great to learn more about you myself, even though we've gotten to know each other a bit through this collaboration. So I have a few questions for you here that I would love to ask. I'd like to start in doing this work with you. We had a lot of discussion on our side at the museum about what civics really is. I think a lot of people think of civics as being government, voting, right? But there's so much more to it that you tap into through your artistic work and your work with kids. Could you talk a little bit more about what civics means to you?
Yes, I think for me, civics is really about that social responsibility that we have to each other. It's not about just me, myself, and I and my own feelings. It's about, ooh, what do I owe to the person next to me who I also want to see thrive? And that goes back to, again, that building of empathy that I want to encourage in kids through the engagement of this artwork.
Fantastic. Do you why kids for you?
Kids are the start of it. I think about myself as a child. And I was very inquisitive, wanted to draw and color on everything with my Crayola crayons, wanted to listen to the stories my grandmother had to tell me about her day. And I think that kids are the very beginning of that curiosity. They're at the beginning of that excitement around experiencing someone who's different from them. And I think if we keep that as a curiosity and as an excitement, that builds a positive intent. And again, that allows them to grow into the empathetic adults that we want to see in the future to help us make decisions.
Indeed, indeed. Um, you have shared with us that you're an elementary school teacher now, working with kids every day, and we'll soon be doing some teaching at the college level. But I imagine that you're a keen sort of observer of behavior in your students. So, how do you see children when they're not supported by adults, or sort of this experience is not facilitated by adults? How do you see children observing art and engaging with art, and what meaning do they take from it? Do you have thoughts?
Yes, so I feel like the biggest thing they take from it is the release. Suddenly,
Mm,
all of the ideas or the feelings or the emotions that they've held inside, they're now letting out, whether it be through the scribbles and just being excited to use that fine motor skill, or through the conversation of, hey, the favorite place that I love is the beach because I go there with my aunts and my uncles and my cousins. I think we have to ensure that we continue to keep kids' form of expression centered as a positive and also encourage them to continue to express themselves in ways that allow them to release. Everyone needs the opportunity to let out what's in their brain and in their heart and in their mind. And I think that art is a good vehicle for that.
hmm hmm We have a question here from a guest. Are your art shows still available to be seen anywhere? This person would love to take their grandson to all of them.
Oh, that's really sweet. Well, at this point, they exist now in archives, which is why I'm happy to do programs like this where I can talk about them and share them. I currently do have one of my works, not one that I presented, but one of my works is in the City of Boston Art Gallery. It's going to be up there through an exhibition called Celebrating CEF with the Arts and Business Council. So it's currently up in Boston from now through, I think, the end of May. So there's that. You can experience that in person if you'd like. But all of the work that I showed today just exists in the archives at this point.
Making way for new things, right?
Yes, very much so.
I love that. Um, we talk a lot at the museum about the decline in children's creativity and how so many factors in their young lives can create a lack of confidence, lack of creative confidence, sort of undermine that natural potential that they all start out with. Um, what you've talked about, access to materials, access to space and support. But really, what could adults who with kids in their lives do to help support that natural creativity from the get-go and really nurture it actively?
I would say asking them questions.
Mm,
Of course, not every kid responds verbally, but I think getting the wheels turning in their brains about their responses is the beginning of something beautiful happening in terms of the blossoming of their creativity. So I would say stay curious, ask your children questions. Don't just assume that you know or understand what they're doing immediately, especially as it relates to their creativity. So I would say starting with asking questions, remaining curious, and also continuing to give them art supplies. I know I sound like a broken record in that regard, but please give them art supplies. Dollar Tree is a fantastic place for crayons and markers and paper. It doesn't have to be expensive. Giving them those tools is just so imperative to help them express what they need to release.
mhm, mhm. I have a couple of the pieces that our visitors made here with me, and I just wanted to note. In fact, I'll share this one. So this is our Bessie the dinosaur for folks who know the Discovery Museum. Very honored to have her there. Um, I was so struck and inspired by your choice, along with our staff collaborators, to place the art inside this wonderful little display, um, sort of vessel, which really gives it a feeling of value that kids may not necessarily feel that their day-to-day art creations have. Can you talk a little bit about the choice for this?
Yes, so that vessel is actually inspired by snow globes. So again, in thinking about intentionality behind the spirit of celebration and specialness that we want people to think about their community collaborations in, snow globes are often seen during Christmas time. We know they depict really detailed and beautiful scenes of different things happening during the holidays. And I wanted to continue that sentiment in the communal gifts work as well. So that's where the idea for the vessel came from, and thinking about what snow globes offer in terms of a sentimental value and how we can translate that to something a little more kid friendly and less dangerous.
Well done, well done. Let's see. I have a question here for you. If you could talk a little bit about the role of bravery in your artistic pursuits or creation of art making, and how do you instill bravery in young artists?
Wow, that's so interesting that you phrased it as bravery because I don't see what I'm doing as brave. I
Hmm.
see what I'm doing as like not necessarily normal, but I see it as an extension of me trying to push boundaries that I think people need to think more deeply about. And I guess that can be considered brave, but to me, it just seems like the right thing to do, you know?
Hmm.
But yes, in terms of thinking about that for the little ones too, I'm a big advocate of raising your voice and ensuring that voices are heard, and again, celebrating differences. So I feel like all of that aligns with the action that you take to actually share and be vulnerable and express something. And it takes, hmm, yeah, I'm struck by that being called bravery because I'm like, is it bravery or is it just like doing the right thing, you know?
I think that that says a lot about you, that you right that you're contemplating that word and doing the right thing. You are inspired to engage civically in your community, and bringing that out of other people who may not naturally feel it maybe requires some bravery. I don't know, it's interesting, it's interesting. um, what is the long game? If I could ask you maybe to be a little audacious, what do you think becomes possible when we invite children to express themselves through art and sort of stand up and speak up for their communities when they're young?
Well, first and foremost, they see themselves as valuable,
Mm,
not just for their own purposes, but valuable to the community that they're a part of. Because again, it's not enough to just thrive by yourself. You want to think about what you owe to the person beside you who also deserves to thrive.
mm,
So again, it's that asserting value. And I think that art is a great way to say, put your stake in the ground and say, hey, I'm here, but also to put a stake in the ground and say, hey, it's not just a me, it's a we. There are other people beside me, around me, whose shoulders I stand on. And all of that is really necessary to create, again, the type of human beings and adults that we want to see in the world, the types of empathetic adults that we want making decisions for us as well.
Yes, indeed, indeed. Sounds like so much of this for you is about connection and human connection and well, I was going to ask you a question, but I'm going to go to this one that came in because it relates. One of our guests says it is brave. uh,
I'll take it. I'll take it.
this person has been doing similar work with students and poetry and helping them to appreciate their community members and develop their voices. So thank you, Christy, for that. Um, Here's a question. You use art as a catalyst to get people to open a little door to their heads. Why do you think art does that?
I think art does that because it's unexpected.
Mm.
I think the immediate way people think that they're going to start engaging is through conversation. And conversation and discussion, of course, is a big part of the equation. But there's something about a visual that just takes you by surprise. And the reaction you have to a visual is so different than the reaction you have to someone speaking to you or reading something. So I think that element of surprise and that breaking up the monotony of how you continue to engage is really what sparks something new.
That's wonderful. You mentioned in your first slide, I think, some things that were really important to you, and joy was there. That's something else that we talk about a lot at the Discovery Museum. You tackle some very potentially challenging, really important topics with joy. And could you say a couple words about that and why that intersection is so powerful and important?
Well, I think it's necessary just because if we stayed in the grief of all of the negative things, we'd never get out of bed. I mean, I want to have a positive reason to get up in the morning. If I think about all the things that keep me down or have tried to hurt me, I don't think I would be much use to anyone. So I think it's just a natural thing to want to lean towards the joy as opposed to the sorrow, and wanting to find elements of celebration. I think also when you're dealing with kids, it's necessary to be silly sometimes. I don't just bust out into the electric slide on videos all willy-nilly, like I do that for kids. Sometimes you have to do a little shimmy and a little shake.
Absolutely.
Sometimes you just need to go, oh my gosh, let it out. I think that's a part of the human experience too, and a necessary part of art making that helps us push through.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Um, what is next for you, Chanel?
Ooh, well, I'm gonna continue to be in my educator bag, I think. Continuing to teach elementary school and starting my professorship at Mass Art soon, which I'm excited about. And I'm gonna continue to make art. I don't know what form that's gonna take just yet, but excited to continue to make art and help others make art as well.
This is fantastic. I can't thank you enough for your time tonight, for your partnership and collaboration with our team at the Discovery Museum, for entering into this, sort of the possibilities of this with us and helping us learn a lot along the way about ourselves and about ways that our museum can serve and can advance art with our kids and visitors and just sort of use this as a new way to reach folks. So grateful to have had the opportunity to work with you. We'll thank everybody for joining us here tonight for our speaker series. We hope we see you next time. Stay tuned for the recording and some links from Chanel. And Chanel, thank you again.
Ooh, have a good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.